The sun had just begun to rise over Pine Meadow Park, a peaceful stretch of land known for slow streams, tall trees, and soft trails that curved through the forest like gentle ribbons. Every morning, the park opened before most people woke up, and the air stayed cool and fresh. This was the time of day that Ravi liked the most. He had worked as a park ranger for 4 years, and the early hour always felt like a gift to him. He enjoyed the quiet, the soft bird calls, and the calm feeling that came when he walked through the trees. Ravi wore a simple ranger uniform, carried a small backpack, and walked with steady steps along the main path. His job was to make sure the park stayed safe and clean, and he took pride in it. He liked greeting visitors, guiding school groups, and teaching children not to litter. Most of all, he liked discovering new things in nature. Even small things like a new flower blooming near the river or a bird building its nest filled him with happiness. This morning felt normal at first. The trees swayed lightly in the breeze, and a few deer stood far off on a hill. Ravi smiled when he saw them and made sure to walk softly so he would not disturb them. He checked the signs on the trail and removed a small fallen branch from the walkway. He found a bright blue feather near the stream and kept it in his pocket because he liked collecting natural items. He found during his walks, everything felt calm. He followed his usual route, moving from the stream area toward the cluster of large rocks near the center of the park. Those rocks had been there for many years and were popular with children who liked climbing them. They were smooth on top and had different shapes, and when sunlight hit them, they looked warm and golden. Ravi passed them almost every day, and he rarely thought much about them. But today, as he approached the biggest rock, something strange happened. At first he thought he heard a bird call. It was soft and high, almost like a whistle. He stopped and looked up into the trees, expecting to see a small bird hopping from branch to branch. But the sound came again, and this time, it did not sound like a bird. It sounded like a cry, a very faint cry. It was so gentle that he almost missed it. It was not sharp or loud. It was more like the kind of sound someone might make when they were tired or calling for help quietly. Ravi felt the hair on his arms stand up. It's not out of fear, but out of surprise. He listened carefully. The cry came again. He turned his head from left to right, trying to understand where it was coming from. He checked behind him, then to the side, then toward the trees. The sound did not match anything he recognized. He had learned to identify the sounds of foxes, birds, insects, and even small animals like rabbits and squirrels. But this sound was different from all of those. He stepped closer to the rocks. When he reached the largest one, he stopped again and waited. The cry returned, slightly clearer this time, and it came from the rock itself. Ravi blinked. He leaned closer. He placed his ear near the rock without touching it. The cry grew a little stronger, but it still sounded gentle and small. It was impossible. Rocks did not cry. He pulled back and looked around again, thinking maybe a small animal had crawled under the rock and become stuck. But the rock sat flat on the ground, and the soil around it was packed tightly. There were no holes, no signs of digging, and no gaps underneath. He walked in a small circle around the rock. The sound remained centered in one place. There was no doubt about it. The cry came from inside the rock. This was the moment Ravi felt something he could not explain. It was not fear. It was not confusion alone. It was more like curiosity mixed with wonder. Something unusual was happening, and the park had never shown him anything quite like this. He took a slow breath and knelt beside the rock. It was smooth and cool to the touch. It looked like every other rock in the cluster. He tried tapping it lightly with his knuckles. The sound that came out was normal for stone. But right after the tap, the cry came again, almost as if responding. Ravi sat back on his heels and tried to think. His job required him to be calm and careful. He knew he should not jump to conclusions. He decided to check his equipment first. He took out his flashlight and shined it around the base of the rock to make sure there was no hidden opening. He used a small tool to gently brush away loose dirt. Nothing changed. The cry continued, steady and soft. He checked his radio. His coworker Mira was on duty today too. She was experienced and calm, and he trusted her judgment. He thought about calling her right away, but something inside him wanted to observe a bit longer before worrying her. He listened again. The cry almost sounded like a child, but it also carried a gentle musical tone, one he had never heard before. It was soothing in a strange way. A small thought crossed his mind. What if something new had been discovered in the park? Many species behaved in ways that people did not expect. Some insects made surprising sounds. Some birds created calls that sounded like human voices. Maybe this was a new creature. The idea filled him with excitement rather than fear. He stood up and moved a few steps back to think more clearly. He imagined all possibilities. Maybe a small device had been dropped behind the rock. Maybe someone had left a toy with a sound chip in it. But he had seen no signs of anything like that. The rock looked untouched. The soil was undisturbed. The sound was too natural to be from a machine. His heart began to beat faster, not out of danger but out of anticipation. Something special was happening here. Something that needed careful attention. Finally, he decided it would be wise to call. Myra. He reached for his radio and pressed the button. He kept his voice calm but clear. He told her that he found something unusual near the large rock cluster and asked if she could join him when she had a moment. While he waited, he knelt beside the rock again. The cry came once more. He noticed that it had a rhythm to it, almost like a heartbeat. The sound pulsed softly and then faded before returning again. It was as if something inside the rock was trying to communicate in the only way it could. Ravi felt a sense of responsibility. If something was trapped, he needed to help. If something new was living there, he needed to protect it. The role of a ranger was not only to guard nature, but to understand it too. A few minutes later, he heard footsteps along the trail. Mira arrived with her usual calm expression. She had tied her hair back and carried a small toolkit with her because she liked to be prepared for inspection tasks. When she reached Ravi, she smiled and asked what he had found. Ravi pointed to the rock and explained what he had heard. Mira listened quietly. She leaned closer and put her ear near the rock, just as Ravi had done. For a moment, there was silence. Then the soft cry came again. Myra's eyes widened slightly. She leaned back and looked at Ravi. She was not frightened, but she was clearly surprised. She asked him to play the sound again if he had recorded it, but he had not thought to do that yet. She sat beside the rock and inspected it carefully. She ran her fingers along the surface, checked the edges, and examined the ground around it. She tapped lightly with her knuckles and listened. The cry responded again, just as before. She looked thoughtful. She finally said that they needed to consider the safest way to understand what was happening. She suggested using a small clearing tool to loosen soil around the edge. Not to break the rock, but to check if something was trapped under it. She wanted to avoid harming anything. Ravi agreed. They opened Mira's toolkit and selected a small wedge and a soft brush. They worked slowly and gently, clearing dirt from around the base. The rock did not move at all. It seemed deeply rooted in the ground. The cry came again, and this time Ravi noticed something new. The sound grew slightly stronger, as if responding to their presence. Mira noticed it too. She paused, listened, and nodded to Ravi. She understood that whatever was inside the rock was aware of them. She suggested they take a short break and think. They moved back a little and sat on a nearby log. Ravi felt his heart still racing with curiosity. Mira tapped her fingers on her knee and thought deeply. She finally said that sometimes nature hid things in ways people did not expect. She said they should not rush. The park was full of mysteries, and sometimes patience revealed answers more safely than action. Ravi agreed. But he also felt a growing need to help whatever was inside. He could not explain why, but he felt a connection to the soft cry. It was as if something inside the rock trusted him. They sat in silence for a moment. The wind moved through the trees. A few birds flew by. Then the cry came again, softer now, almost calling for attention. Ravi stood up again. He gently placed his hand on the rock, feeling its cool surface. He whispered to himself that they would find a way to help. Mira stood beside him and nodded. They did not know yet what they would discover. They did not know yet how the rock would open, but they both felt that something extraordinary was hidden inside this ordinary-looking stone, something that waited for them to understand it, something that would change the quiet park in a way no one expected. Part 1 ends with Ravi and Mira standing beside the mysterious rock, listening to the gentle cry that continued to call from within, ready to uncover the secret that waited patiently for them. The morning sun climbed higher above the trees, spreading warm light across Pine Meadow Park. The soft cry from inside the rock continued in a slow, steady rhythm, and Ravi and Mira stood quietly beside it, both unsure of what they would discover next. They had worked in the park for years, and they had seen many strange things, but nothing had ever compared to this. It was both mysterious and gentle, and neither of them felt any fear. Instead, they felt curiosity mixed with a sense of responsibility. Whatever was inside the rock needed help, and they wanted to give it. Ravi took a slow breath as the cry sounded again. He noticed that the sound seemed calmer now, as if the creature or object inside understood that someone outside was listening. Mira knelt beside the rock once more and placed her hand softly on its surface. She closed her eyes for a moment, almost as if she wanted to feel any vibration or warmth coming from inside. She waited for the next sound, and when it came, she opened her eyes slowly. She told Ravi that she was certain the sound was not from any machine or toy. There was something natural about it, something alive. Ravi agreed. The cry was too warm, too emotional, to be anything artificial. He crouched next to the rock as well, and placed both hands flat on its surface. The stone felt smooth and cool, just like any other rock in the park. But the sound inside gave it a strange sense of life. Mira stepped back and looked around their surroundings. The clearing was peaceful, with tall trees standing like quiet watchers around them. Sunlight filtered through the branches and danced over the rock, making it shine faintly. The gentle light made the moment feel even more special. She wondered if the rock had been here for hundreds of years, holding its secret quietly until today. She wondered why the sound had started now. Maybe something had changed inside. Ravi suggested they try speaking softly near the rock to see if the sound reacted. It was a strange idea, but they both felt that whatever was inside could sense their presence. Mira agreed and leaned close to the rock again. She spoke in a calm, kind voice, telling the rock that they were not here to harm anything and that they only wanted to help. Her voice was steady and gentle, the kind of voice someone might use to calm a frightened pet. Ravi waited quietly beside her. After a short pause, the cry sounded again, but this time it had a new tone. It was still soft, but it carried a warmer feeling, almost like relief. Mira gasped lightly and turned to Ravi. She believed the sound had changed in response to her voice. Ravi felt the same. They both sat down on the grass, facing the rock. They needed time to think. They needed a plan. If they were going to open the rock, they had to do it safely. They did not want to damage anything inside. They also did not want to make any mistake that could harm the environment. Parks were delicate, and one wrong move could cause trouble. They needed the right tools and the right method. Myra suggested they call the research team in the park's observation building. The team often studied unusual plants, insects, and natural formations. They were trained to handle fragile discoveries. Ravi thought it was a good idea, but he also wondered if calling more people too soon might overwhelm whatever was inside the rock. The cry was gentle. The creature or object inside might be sensitive to noise or to many strangers. After a moment of thought, they agreed to wait before calling the team. They decided to observe the rock a little longer and see if any new clues appeared. Ravi pulled out a small notebook from his backpack. He liked writing down things he observed during his patrols, and today he planned to record everything. He wrote about the size of the rock, the shape, the sound, and the way it changed when Mira spoke. Mira watched him write and then took a few pictures of the rock with her park camera. She did not want to forget anything, and she planned to study the cracks and edges to see if anything looked unusual. She knelt beside the rock once more and gently brushed away loose soil from the sides with her soft brush. She made sure not to damage anything. As she worked, Ravi noticed something new. The sunlight hit the rock in a specific angle, and there was a faint shimmer along a thin line on the surface. He asked Myra to stop moving for a moment so he could look closely. He leaned in and touched the area lightly. It felt smoother than the rest of the rock, almost polished. Myra examined it with him. The thin line curved across the rock like a natural seam, but now it looked more important than before. Ravi wondered if the seam might be a clue. Maybe the rock was not a solid piece. Maybe it had a hidden opening. Myra suggested they tried gently tapping near the seam to see if the sound inside changed. They both wanted to avoid causing harm, so they used the softest tools in their small kit. Myra tapped gently with the wooden handle of her brush. Not enough to crack anything, just enough to send a small vibration through the stone. The cry came again, but Ravi noticed that it sounded slightly louder. It seemed like the creature or object inside had sensed the vibration. Myra tried tapping again, this time even softer. The cry responded once more, maintaining its calm rhythm. Ravi wrote down everything. He felt like he was slowly learning the pattern. He thought the creature inside might be recognizing their care. He believed that whatever was inside was aware enough to react. As the two rangers continued their careful work, the quiet clearing became a place full of hope and wonder. The trees rustled softly in the breeze as if watching the scene unfold. A squirrel ran across a fallen branch and stopped to look at Ravi. A pair of birds landed on a branch above, chirping calmly. Even the air seemed to hold its breath with curiosity. Myra leaned back and studied the rock once more. She said that the seam might be the key. She believed that if they could carefully loosen the area around it, the rock might open naturally. They would not need to break anything. They would only need to encourage the rock to release whatever was inside, Ravi agreed. They began brushing away more soil from the seam. It took time, but they worked with patience. Every now and then, they paused to listen. The cry always came back, steady and gentle. Ravi felt a growing sense of connection with the sound. He did not know what was inside, but he felt responsible for it. He felt that he and Myra were meant to find it. After nearly half an hour of careful brushing and clearing, they noticed something new. The seam on the rock became a little clearer. It formed a shape resembling a soft curve, almost like an outline of something hidden inside. Myra traced the shape with her finger, and Ravi felt a chill of excitement run down his spine. They were getting closer to understanding the mystery. Myra suggested they try lifting the rock slightly from one side. She thought that if the rock was naturally hollow, it might shift a little when pressure was applied. Ravi agreed, but reminded her that they needed to be extremely careful. They positioned themselves on opposite sides of the rock and pressed gently upward, to their surprise. The rock shifted just a tiny bit. Not enough to lift it fully, but enough to show that it was not completely solid. Something was definitely inside. Before they could try again, the cry came once more. But this time it was different. It carried a soft melody, almost like a gentle hum. It sounded peaceful and hopeful. Ravi and Myra looked at each other. They both felt the same thing. The creature or object inside knew they were helping. They stepped back for a moment to rest and think. They sat on the grass again, watching the rock closely. Ravi drank some water from his bottle and offered one to Myra. They talked in low voices, planning their next steps. They did not want to call the research team yet. They wanted to try one more approach. Myra suggested using a thin wooden wedge to open the seam just slightly. Not enough to break anything, but enough to see if there was a natural gap inside. Ravi agreed. They took the wooden wedge, which was smooth and safe, and gently inserted it into the seam. They pressed softly, careful not to force anything. The rock responded. A faint, warm glow appeared along the seam, so soft that it took Ravi a moment to realize it was real. Myra gasped softly. She touched the glowing line with the tip of her finger. The glow pulsed gently, in the same rhythm as the cry. They could hardly believe their eyes. The rock was reacting to their touch. It was as if it wanted to open, but only when treated with care. Ravi removed the wedge and traced the glowing seam with his fingertips. He whispered softly, telling the creature inside that they were here to help. The glow brightened slightly. The cry came again, warm and steady. It was the most magical moment either of them had ever experienced. Mira looked at Ravi. He looked back. They both knew they were close. The rock was not an ordinary stone. It held something special, something gentle, something alive, and they were ready to find out what it was. Part 2 ends, with Ravi and Mira standing before the glowing seam of the mysterious rock, preparing for the moment when the hidden secret inside would reveal itself. The gentle glow along the seam of the rock shimmered softly like a quiet sunrise. Ravi and Mira both stood still, watching the light pulse in a slow and peaceful rhythm. It felt like the rock was breathing. A soft cry from inside continued, warm and steady, matching the glow perfectly. The entire clearing seemed to change with the light. The trees looked brighter, the air felt warmer, and even the shadows on the ground seemed to move gently with the glow. Ravi took a slow breath. He felt a strange mix of excitement and calm. The glow made the moment feel magical. There was no fear in him, only curiosity and a strong desire to help. Ira felt the same. She watched the glowing seam with wide eyes, amazed by what nature had hidden inside this simple-looking rock for so long. The rock's glow brightened slightly when Mira placed her hand near it.
Ow.
She did not touch the seam, but the light still pulsed in response. She stepped back and looked at Ravi. She told him that the glow seemed to react to kindness and gentle movement. Ravi agreed. From the very beginning, the rock had responded only to their soft actions and careful steps. They sat down on the grass again to think. They wanted to open the rock, but they did not want to harm anything inside. The glow made it clear that whatever was in there was alive, or at least sensitive to touch and sound. It needed gentle care. Mira suggested they try using their hands instead of tools. She believed that the rock trusted them more when they touched it softly. Ravi thought about it and nodded. Ravi walked to the rock and placed both hands on the warm, glowing seam. Mira stood beside him and did the same. Together they pressed lightly, not trying to break anything, only encouraging the rock to open naturally. They waited, and the glow grew brighter. The soft cry from inside changed slightly, becoming calm and hopeful. Slowly, very slowly, the rock began to respond. The seam widened just a little. The glow gently spilled out, lighting the air around their hands. Ravi felt a warm breeze rise from the seam. It was soft and comforting, almost like the warm breath of a gentle creature waking from a long sleep. Mira leaned close and listened. The sound inside was clearer now. It no longer sounded like a cry of distress. It sounded like a call, a peaceful call. She smiled and encouraged Ravi to keep pressing lightly. The two rangers worked together, carefully widening the seam bit by bit. Each tiny movement brought more light into the clearing. Ravi felt that they were very close to seeing what was inside. Mira also sensed it. She spoke softly, telling the creature inside that they were here to help and that it was safe. The glow pulsed gently at the sound of her voice. They felt reassured. As they continued working, a bird flew down from a nearby branch and landed near their feet. It tilted its head as if watching the glowing seam. A small rabbit hopped out from behind a bush and sat quietly a few steps away. Even the animals seemed drawn by the warm light coming from the rock. The clearing felt calm and protected, as if nature itself approved of what was happening. Ravi paused for a moment to rest his hands. He asked Mira if she felt the warm breeze coming from the crack. She nodded, saying it felt like the breath of something living. Whatever was inside, it was gentle and simply waiting for the right moment to come out. They took a short break. Ravi drank some water and offered Mira some as well. They sat quietly, listening to the soft pulses of sound coming from the rock. Mira wondered aloud if the creature inside had been sleeping for a long time. She guessed that the warm glow might be a sign of its energy returning. Ravi thought that made sense. The sound had been faint at first, but now it was stronger and more musical. After resting, they returned to the rock and placed their hands along the glowing seam again. They pressed gently once more. The rock moved slightly, shifting enough to show that it was ready to open further. Mira encouraged Ravi to lift one, sighed while she pushed on the other, making sure not to apply too much pressure. The rock responded again. The seam widened more than before. A bright golden light shone out from inside, bright enough to paint their hands and faces in a warm glow. The soft cry became a gentle melody, full of calm. Ravi felt his heart race, but not from fear. He felt honored. The rock was trusting them. They looked inside, but the light was too bright to see clearly. Mira shielded her eyes and leaned closer. She told Ravi she could see something moving in the light, something small and round, almost like a glowing heart. Ravi leaned closer and saw the same thing. The light softened, making the shape a little clearer. Inside the rock was a small orb, no bigger than a fruit. It glowed from within, pulsing in the same steady rhythm they had been hearing. The orb had a smooth surface and floated slightly above the bottom of the rock's hollow center. It emitted a warm, golden light that seemed alive. The gentle cry came from the orb. It was not a sad cry. It sounded like a call for attention, a call for connection. Ravi reached his hand slowly toward the orb, his movements careful and respectful. Mira watched closely, ready to react if anything changed. The orb reacted before he touched it, floated a little higher and came closer to Ravi's hand. The light around it softened, forming a warm glow that surrounded his fingertips. When he finally touched it gently, the orb hummed softly, as if greeting him. Ravi felt a wave of calm wash over him. The orb felt warm and smooth, like touching warm water in the sunlight. It seemed to respond to his kindness. Mira touched the orb too, and it glowed brighter. The rock shifted again, and the seam widened fully, revealing the entire inside. It was hollow and smooth, shaped naturally like a nest. The orb floated in the center, shining with gentle golden light. Mira whispered softly, asking the orb if it was all right. The orb glowed in response. She smiled, amazed by how peaceful and delicate it was. She wondered how it had been inside the rock for so long, and why it chose today to call out. Ravi gently lifted the orb. It rose easily, almost weightless, like it wanted to follow his movement. He held it carefully in both hands. The warm glow filled his palms. The orb did not show any fear. It trusted him completely. When Ravi stepped back holding the glowing orb, the animals in the clearing remained calm. The bird near their feet chirped softly, as if welcoming the orb. The small rabbit hopped closer without any sign of fear. Nature accepted this moment as something peaceful and good. Mira examined the hollow inside the rock. It looked smooth, with no rough edges or cracks that could harm anything. It looked like the rock had grown around the orb naturally, as if the rock was a protective shell. Mira guessed that the orb had been developing inside the rock for many years. Maybe it had reached a stage where it needed to come out. The cry must have been a signal that its time had arrived. Ravi continued holding the orb. The golden glow made his uniform look warm and radiant. The orb hovered slightly above his hands, as if it had the ability to float on its own but stayed close to him because it felt safe. He felt a connection with it. A gentle bond he had never felt with anything else in the forest. Myra asked him how the orb felt in his hands. Ravi said it felt warm, peaceful, and full of gentle energy. He said it did not feel dangerous at all. Mira agreed. She stepped closer to examine it more. She noticed the glow had a soft pattern, like tiny waves moving inside it. It was beautiful. They both stood quietly, unsure of what to do next. They knew they had to protect the orb, but they also wanted to understand it. Mira suggested taking it to the research cabin, where experts could gently study it. But Ravi felt that the orb might not want to leave the forest. He thought they should give it time to adjust before making any decisions. The orb pulsed softly in his hands, almost as if agreeing with him. Mira saw the reaction and decided they should stay in the clearing for now. They both sat down with the orb between them, watching its light dance across the grass. The sun climbed higher in the sky, but the golden glow of the orb remained stronger than sunlight. The clearing looked magical with the combined brightness. The orb hummed gently, and Ravi and Mira felt a deep calm settle around them. They wondered what the orb would become. Was it a creature inside a shell? Were they witnessing the birth of something new? Was it something rare that only appeared every few generations? They had many questions. But for now, they were simply amazed. Ravi placed the orb carefully on the soft grass. The orb floated just above the ground, not touching it, but staying close. It glowed warmly, movements gentle and slow. Mira laughed softly in surprise when the orb drifted closer to her shoes. It seemed curious. They spent the next hour observing the orb. They listened to its hum, watched its glow, and noted its reactions to their voices and gestures. Every time they spoke kindly, the orb glowed brighter. Every time they stepped too far, it drifted closer as if wanting company. The orb was peaceful, curious, and gentle. By the time the sun reached the middle of the sky, the orb floated higher and turned slowly, as if preparing for something. Ravi and Mira watched closely. They did not know it yet. But the next moment would surprise them even more than anything else the rock had revealed. Part 3 ends with the glowing orb floating higher in the warm clearing, ready to show its next secret to Ravi and Mira, who watched with full attention and gentle hearts. Morning came with a warm golden light that touched the tops of the tall trees. The forest looked calm, but inside the ranger station the atmosphere was filled with questions. Armin and the other rangers had barely slept. Their minds were full of thoughts about the glowing orb, the gentle creature held inside it, and the strange energy that had appeared when the rock cracked open. After a quick breakfast, Armand stepped outside to breathe in the fresh morning air. He lifted his face toward the sky as if asking for direction. He knew he needed answers. He also knew he could not wait for clues to simply appear. Something in the forest had stirred, something old and hidden. The little creature seemed to be at the center of it. The small being was still inside the shelter room, resting peacefully. The orb was now open like a flower, revealing soft layers shaped like petals. They were warm to the touch and still glowing faintly. The creature looked more awake than the previous day, and its eyes followed anyone who stepped near it. There was fear in its eyes, but also trust. Armin walked inside the room and stood near its bed. He did not speak at first. He only watched the small creature, who looked back at him with quiet curiosity. Then Armin slowly raised his hand and placed it over his chest, hoping the creature would remember the gesture from the forest to his relief. The creature lifted its tiny hand and repeated the gesture. It was a small action, but it meant they understood each other. Before Armand could say anything more, the radio outside crackled urgently. One of the rangers shouted his name. Armand hurried outside to find Mira standing with a worried expression. Mira pointed toward the forest. A strange wind was passing through the trees, bending them slightly, even though there was no storm. The leaves rattled in a rhythmic way, almost like a signal. The air felt charged with something invisible. Armand glanced back at the room where the creature lay. The energy from the forest seemed connected to it. Maybe others of its kind were out there? Maybe something dangerous was also searching. He looked at Mira and spoke with steady determination. We need to go check the North Trail again. Something is happening there. Mira nodded. She trusted Armand completely, and she felt the same silent pull that he did. They gathered supplies. Radios, ropes, water, and a small light machine that could detect heat and unusual energy patterns. Armand also brought a thick blanket in case the creature needed extra protection before leaving. Armand checked on the small being again. He knelt beside it and spoke softly. We will find answers. You are safe here. The creature blinked slowly and placed its hand on his sleeve. It seemed to sense that Armand was leaving. It looked worried, making soft, trembling sounds. Armand carefully tucked the blanket around it and gave a reassuring nod. Then he and Mira stepped out into the forest. The North Trail had always been peaceful. Tall pine trees lined both sides, and the sound of birds filled the air. But today, the forest was unusually silent. Not a single bird sang. Not a single animal stirred in the bushes. Even the wind felt like it was holding its breath. As they walked deeper into the trail, the strange energy from earlier returned. The leaves shook, even though the air was still. A low hum echoed between the trees. Myra held the small energy reader tightly. Its screen flashed with bright pulses. Armin, this is not normal. The machine is picking up strong waves from ahead. They kept walking, each step echoing louder than the last in the quiet woods. Then they saw it. The ground ahead had a glowing pattern etched into it, as if the earth itself had been carved with light. It looked similar to the mark that had shown on the creature's forehead the day before. But this one was much larger and spread across the soil like a symbol. Armand knelt to examine it. The ground was warm, and the glow pulsed like a heartbeat. Suddenly another sound broke through the stillness. It was not a cry, but a low, heavy rumble. The trees to their right shook, and Mira grabbed Armand's arm. "Something is moving over there." Armand stood quickly. Both of them backed away slowly, their hands near their equipment. The rumble grew louder. Leaves rustled. Branches snapped. Then the trees parted, revealing a large figure. It was not a wild animal. It was not a bear or a mountain lion. The creature stood on two legs and had a tall frame. Its skin was dark and smooth like stone, and its eyes glowed faintly, matching the light on the ground. Armand's heart pounded in his chest. Mira took a step back. The creature did not attack. Instead, it stared at them as if studying them. Armand raised his hands slowly in a peaceful gesture. The tall creature tilted its head. Then it touched its chest in the same way Armand and the small creature had done. Armand was stunned. Mira gasped. It knows the sign. It must be connected to the small one. Before Armand could respond, the creature stepped closer, and the ground pattern glowed even brighter. The tall being placed its hand on the glowing mark and pressed gently. A beam of soft light shot out from the ground toward the sky. Mira shielded her eyes. Armand held his ground, though he felt his heart racing. The tall creature then pointed toward the ranger station. Its movements were slow and deliberate, as if trying to communicate something important. "You want us to go?" Back, Armand asked quietly. The being nodded once. Armand glanced at Mira. Something was happening at the station. Something the tall creature knew about. They turned and started back quickly, though they kept glancing over their shoulders. The tall being watched them for a long moment, and slowly faded into the trees as if becoming part of the forest itself. Armand and Mira hurried down the trail. As they got closer to the station, they heard strange sounds. Not frightening, but urgent. The air around them felt warm again. The light breeze carried a soft hum that echoed like a whisper. When they reached the station, they stopped in shock. The small creature was standing outside the door. It was not weak anymore. Its body glowed gently, and the light stretched in a soft film around the station. The creature's eyes were brighter than before, and its tiny hands were lifted as if guiding the glow. Armand rushed forward. "What happened? How did you come outside?" The creature turned its gaze toward him. Its expression was calm, almost wise. It walked forward slowly and placed its small hand on his arm. A warm pulse went through him, not painful, but powerful. Mira stepped beside them. "Armand, I think it is trying to show us something." The creature pointed toward the sky. Clouds were gathering above the forest, twisting in circles as if drawn by unseen forces. A soft streak of light moved inside the clouds, swirling in patterns that matched the glowing ground symbols. Armand stared up, breath caught in his throat. Something bigger is coming. The creature lowered its arm and looked at Armand with deep, shimmering eyes. It seemed to be asking for trust, support, and protection. Armand understood at once. "We are with you. Whatever is coming, we will face it together." The creature nodded, and the glow around the station expanded, wrapping the building in a shield of warm light. The clouds above the forest gathered into a tight spiral. They moved as if the sky itself was turning slowly. Armand watched with steady eyes. He felt fear, but also a growing sense of duty. The small creature stood beside him, glowing with a soft light that wrapped around its body like a gentle shield. Mira stood on the other side, ready for anything. The wind grew stronger. Leaves lifted off the ground and circled above the station. The warm glow from the creature spread farther, covering the trees near the ranger building. It was as if the forest was being protected by an invisible blanket. Armand placed his hand on the creature's shoulder. "I am here. We will stay with you." The creature looked up at him with trust. Its eyes shone brighter than ever. It lifted its hand toward the sky. The swirling clouds responded. A long beam of white light pushed through the middle of the cloud spiral. It stretched downward. Touching the ground a short distance from the station, Mira stepped forward with wide eyes. "Is something coming through?" That light. Armin nodded slowly. He felt the same. Whatever was arriving was connected to the small creature. Maybe it was a friend. Maybe it was a guardian. Or maybe something that had been looking for the little one for a long time. The ground began to tremble gently. Not enough to knock anything over, but enough to make Armin's heart beat faster. The beam of light thickened. A shape appeared in the center. At first it looked like a shadow. Then it gained form. Tall, thin, moving slowly. The creature beside Armin squeezed his sleeve. It was not afraid. Instead, it looked hopeful. Armin saw that hope and felt some of his own fear melt away. The shape stepped out of the beam. It was a tall being, similar to the one they had seen deep in the woods. Its skin glowed with smooth patterns of white and silver. Its eyes were warm and gentle. Its presence brought a sense of calm to the entire forest. Birds hiding in the branches began to chirp again. The wind softened. Even the air felt cleaner. Armin and Myra stood still. They did not speak. They waited. The tall being looked around slowly. Then its eyes fell on the small creature. A bright warmth spread across the tall being's face. It stepped forward in a graceful way. The small creature ran to it with surprising speed. It reached the tall being and wrapped its tiny arms around its leg. The tall being bent down and lifted the small creature into its arms. They held each other in a way that was full of affection and relief. Armin realized this was not just a guardian. It was family. Mira whispered softly. They found each other. Armin nodded. A weight lifted from his chest. This was what the small creature had needed. It had not been abandoned. It had been separated. And now they were together again. The tall being then looked at Armin and Mira. It stepped forward slowly while still holding the small creature. The tall being placed one hand gently on its own chest. The small creature copied the gesture. They were thanking them. Armin returned the sign. So did Mira. The tall being's eyes glowed with appreciation. Then it spoke. The voice did not come as a sound. It came as a gentle vibration inside their minds. Peaceful, clear, kind. "Thank you for helping the young one. Thank you for keeping it safe." Armin responded out loud, because it felt more natural for him. We were only doing what anyone should do. We heard it crying. We wanted to help. The tall being nodded slowly. The young one was lost. It was trapped inside the protective shell. The shell kept it alive after it fell from our traveling light. When it cracked, your kindness woke its heart again. Armin's eyes widened slightly. It fell from the sky. Tall being lifted the small creature higher as if explaining, "Our people travel between places in the sky. We use light paths. Sometimes storms break the paths." The young one slipped away. The shell protected it until someone with a good heart found it. Armin felt a warm sting behind his eyes. He thought about the moment he had heard the crying. How he had broken the rock. How the creature had looked at him with fear and hope. He never imagined something this extraordinary. Myra stepped forward with curiosity. "Is the young one hurt or in danger?" Tall Bean shook its head gently. "It is safe now. It is stronger than before because your care kept its light alive." Armin looked at the small creature. It smiled a gentle smile. It reached its tiny hand toward Armin's face. Armin leaned down and let it touch his cheek. The warm pulse passed through him again. It was a feeling of gratitude. A feeling of peace. The tall being continued, "We must return above. The young one is needed. But it wanted to see you once more before we leave. It remembers you. It trusts you. And it will carry your kindness with it forever." Armin's chest tightened. He had known this moment would come. Yet it still hurt a little. He had grown attached to the little creature in such a short time. Its trust felt like a fragile treasure that he did not want to lose. He took a slow breath. "I am glad it is safe. That is all that matters." The tall being nodded in respect. Then it stepped back, toward the beam of light still touching the ground. The small creature lifted its hand again, reaching toward Arman and Mira. Arman lifted his hand in return. "Be safe." "Stay strong," Mira added gently. "We will never forget you." The beam of light began to brighten again. The tall being walked into it. The small creature rested its head on the tall being's shoulder, but kept its eyes on Arman and Mira until the very last moment. The light grew stronger. The wind circled gently around them. The tall being and the small creature rose slowly into the beam. Then the beam lifted upward, moving toward the spiral of clouds. The sky shimmered with soft silver light. The clouds opened for a moment, as if forming a gate. The beam passed through it. Then the clouds closed again, leaving only clear blue sky behind. The forest was silent for several minutes. Peaceful. Still, Arman stood motionless. Mira stood beside him. Neither of them spoke at first. They simply stared at the sky where the beam had vanished. Finally, Mira broke the silence. "Arman, you think anyone will believe us?" Arman gave a gentle smile. "Maybe not. But that does not matter. What happened was real. We helped someone who needed us. That is enough." Mira took a deep breath and nodded. The forest slowly returned to its natural life. Birds sang again. A gentle breeze touched their faces. Everything felt normal, yet everything felt changed. Arman and Mira walked back to the station. The warm glow that had covered the building had faded. The air felt lighter. The energy wave had disappeared completely. Inside the station, the room where the creature had rested was quiet. The orb lay open and empty. Its glow was gone, leaving only a soft, smooth shell. Arman picked it up gently. Even without its light, the shell felt special. Like a memory he could hold? He placed it on the desk. Myra looked around the room. "What?" Arman smiled. "Now we go back to our work. But we will never forget what we saw. And if the forest ever calls again, we will answer." Later that evening, as the sun set behind the trees, Arman stepped outside alone. He looked up at the open sky. A single silver streak flashed far above, like a small star moving in a straight path. Arman's heart lifted. Safe travels. Little one. The streak disappeared, and the night sky settled peacefully. Arman went inside the station. The world around him seemed the same, but he was different now. Kinder, braver, more aware of the quiet wonders hidden in the forest. He closed the door. Gently behind him, the story of the small creature, and the glowing rock would stay with him for the rest of his life. It would stay with Mira too. It would live inside the trees, the wind, and the quiet paths of the forest.